Welcome back, class, to the true and accurate history of the Iroquois League. This is part 3 in our series of lectures. When we left off, the Iroquois League was at war with the Aztec, and as a result, with their ally, the city-state of Belgrade. Hiawatha had decided that the city-state of Belgrade posed the first major threat. The frontier town of Grand River was doing a good job of holding off the Aztec jaguars, but Belgrade was right in the middle of Iroquois territory. As such, it needed to be taken care of before steps could be taken to pacify Montezuma. During this time, Dekanahwideh publicly supported Hiawatha's campaign of aggression against the enemies. Privately, however, he felt differently on the matter. He was, after all, the prophet of peace, and this was very much a time of war. It was fortunate then that Hiawatha was the nominal leader of the Iroquois League. Without his strong hand, it's very possible that they would have been crushed early on by the Americans or by the Aztec. As it was, his determination to keep his people free may have proven the deciding factor in the wars and tribulations and trials to follow. The Mohican warriors began to prove their worth almost immediately. Belgrade came under attack by sea and by land, and it wasn't long before the continual bombardments against the city would prove useful. The Jaguar warriors at Grand River found themselves sandwiched between the fierce warriors and the Mohicans who had come, snuck around behind them, past the north. On the sea, they attempted to disrupt the Iroquois domination of nautical power, but they didn't have much success there. Here we can see Belgrade making a stand against the triremes, but is unable to hold out against the ferocious Mohicans. And here again, we can see a wounded trireme pulling back to allow a different boat a chance to take down an Aztec aggressor. During this time, Onondaga continued to act as the major point of production in the Iroquois League. Siam, as well, seeing a weakness in the Iroquois defenses due to the war with the Aztec, began to publicly denounce Hiawatha and Dekanahwideh, calling them warmongers, despite the fact that the Iroquois were acting in self-preservation. Regardless, Buffalo Creek began to shore up its defenses. Hiawatha had an inkling that it wouldn't be long before Siam struck as well. It was at this time, shortly after Belgrade was conquered, that the Americans made their first push up towards Akwesasne. Grand River was under assault by new warriors from the Aztec, who used the same metal pulled from the ground that the Mohawk had put to such great effect with their tomahawks. The Aztec used it to create a long-bladed weapon called a sword, which was, fortunately, slightly less effective, or at the least their warriors were slightly less effective than those of the Iroquois. Akwesasne was in trouble. Without the navy nearby to support it, it had very little in the way of defenses. And most of the warriors were either over at Belgrade or moving down towards Buffalo Creek. Hiawatha quickly sent the navy to support Akwesasne, but they had to sail up and all the way around the point to get over to Akwesasne and the Great Barrier Reef. Spearmen began to make their way overland from Onondaga as well, but without an army there to support them, it was possible that they could get overwhelmed by the American invaders. This was something that Hiawatha and Dekanahwideh both agreed was not a good thing. Even so, Akwesasne held out admirably, waiting for the navy to come, holding on to that hope of succor. Some American spearmen made a mistake of moving a little too close to Onondaga on their way to attack Akwesasne, and the Iroquois warriors soon began to engage them. At the same time, the navy arrived off the shore of Akwesasne and began to put paid to the spearmen from America who were attacking the city, as we can see here. There we go. Reinforcements from Onondaga coming in from the east, and the navy attacking from the west. Osininka began to mass its forces and head towards Atlanta, a nearby American settlement. Hiawatha declared that it was time for the Iroquois to go on the offensive. Dekanahwideh again publicly supported the decision, but privately disagreed with this tactic of aggression. He saw it as needlessly violent, and he saw it as moving down a road which strayed from the path of peace and moved dangerously close to the territory of Hiawatha's former existence as a violent cannibal. Fortunately, Hiawatha did not eat any of the Americans that he captured. That would have been uncivilized. You can see here the opening bouts with Americans surrounding Atlanta, as well as the ongoing defense of Akwesasne, which was going quite well, in fact. The Americans had largely been defeated in the region, or had decided to pull back, but Hiawatha ordered them chased down to teach a lesson to the white snakes. Let them remember the fury of the Iroquois. Grand River continued to shore up its defenses as it was on the border and was the entrance to the Iroquois realm. Anyone who wanted to get at them from the east, those being the Americans or the Aztec, would have to either come through Grand River or through the south through the entire Siamese Empire, which for now Hiawatha was willing to bet would remain quiescent, at least until something would change in the progress of the battle with America and the Aztec. Writing was discovered at this time, even as Atlanta came under siege. Philadelphia was also under bombardment by the Navy, which was hoping to divert forces from the defense of Atlanta. Even so, troops began to feint towards Philadelphia at the same time. They had been lured there by reports of great weather. The scouts were telling them that it was always sunny in Philadelphia, so they had a great desire to take over the city as well. Building on what the scouts had discovered in Atlanta, Philadelphia, Dekanahwideh discovered ways to keep animals in captivity. At the same time, Hiawatha's forces captured Atlanta. Hiawatha at first wanted to completely destroy the city, but Dekanahwideh argued against this tactic, saying that there was no need to be brutes about the whole process. There was no need to destroy the Americans, merely to drive them out of the ancestral Iroquois lands and keep them away from the Iroquois settlements in the north. Some barbarians who had been paid off by the Aztec had set up camp south of Belgrade and were harrying the weary forces there. At the same time, Atlanta was defending itself from American forces who were attempting to retake the city. This was the first time an American city had been conquered, and the first time that the Iroquois had conquered a city of a rival nation, and in fact, it was the first time any civilization had conquered the city of another. This was a shocking event in the history of this part of the world, and it was shocking to the people of the Iroquois League. They were not happy to see this violent direction that they were taking. Privately, most of them agreed with Dekanahwideh's private thoughts, which of course remained private. No one was willing to speak out against Hiawatha. All of them believed him when he told them that what they were doing was for the best, that the white snakes could not be trusted, and that they must be driven from the shores of their lands. The campaign against the Americans continued apace. Meanwhile, Montezuma sued for peace, as did Washington. Hiawatha accepted the deal from Montezuma to keep the eastern attack from being a concern, but refused peace with the Americans. And immediately, Siam declared war. They knew that with all the forces of the Iroquois busy attacking American cities, they would have an excellent chance to take out the Iroquois cities closer to them. Naturally, the Iroquois were not thrilled with this thought, especially the people of the slightly isolated Buffalo Creek, not to mention Osininka and the newly captured Atlanta, all of which lay on the borders of the Siamese Empire, which was currently the largest empire in the New World. But really, what could they do? With the Siamese attacking, with the Americans on the defensive, and the Aztec raising hell, it was only a matter of time until the British joined in. The Red Snakes, indeed, joined the fray after all. Not fighting the White Snakes, as Dekanahwideh had foreseen, but fighting the Iroquois themselves. This was a shocking development to the people of the Iroquois League, leading to greater unhappiness in the empire, which, though it was not called such, was clearly an empire indeed. Philadelphia was taken in 25 BC, shortly after the British declared war. But Hiawatha, having taken the city, saw that it was not at all sunny. It was mostly cold, very dirty, and the weather tended to be overcast. This enraged him. All that effort for nothing. Three American cities remained. 4, if you counted those squatted down in the south, but those were not cities that the scouts had ever seen. Only 3 were still known to Hiawatha. Regardless, as the century came to an end, in his rage and in his desire to show the Americans that there would be no mercy, he destroyed Philadelphia. It was at this point that a new era began. Before, it had been BC, before conquest. Now, with the destruction of Philadelphia, the calendar changed to AD, after destruction. It's the first time that a city had been destroyed by an invading force, and again, caused great unhappiness within the League. Even so, the warriors dutifully followed the orders of Hiawatha, defending Atlanta, Osininka, not to mention Onondaga and Belgrade. Forces were pulled away from Grand River and sent down towards Buffalo Creek, especially with the Siamese massing their forces, and British warriors in the area as well. Hiawatha concentrated most of his forces in Atlanta. He was concerned that the Americans would concentrate their efforts there, but he was allowing himself to become blind to the Siamese threat. They posed a much larger danger to the Iroquois Empire than did the much diminished Americans. But his hatred of the White Snakes was overriding his common sense. So Atlanta became his obsession. As we can see here, the Mohicans and the Spearmen are constantly fighting off wave after wave of Americans trying to retake their homeland. Unsuccessfully, of course. He did create mounted warriors in the image of those that had attacked from the Siamese Empire, and sent them down to do battle with the Siamese in Osininka. It was at this time that Dekanahwideh came to him and revealed that they were losing a great deal of money each year, and that the people were furious with Hiawatha's violent decisions. Hiawatha insisted that the people were merely ignorant, did not understand the necessity of defending their lands against the Siamese and against the Americans, not to mention the Red Snakes as well now, the British. In his mind, the people, sitting at home in their safe cities, did not understand how dangerous it was on the frontiers of the League. There may have been truth to his beliefs. Regardless, the waves of Americans continued to come. The Siamese horsemen proved devastating against the Iroquois warriors, though they fell swiftly enough to the spearmen. The war seemed to be at a standstill, a stalemate, if you will. People of Buffalo Creek attempted to fight back against the Siamese and push them away from their borders, but the empire was simply too large. They had too many troops, too many soldiers, constantly striking north, striking east, striking west against the Iroquois. Hiawatha grew desperate and angry, throwing more and more troops into more and more dangerous and precarious situations in a desperate attempt to show the Americans once and for all that they needed to surrender, to show the Siamese that they needed to back away, to show the British that they needn't even bother trying to sweep west towards the ferocious Iroquois. Largely, it seemed he was successful. Unfortunately, this was only the beginning of a much more violent, much more deadly, much more fatal age for the Iroquois League. Until next time, all the best.